Thank you for joining and welcome to Lead Dev Bookmarked. Lead Dev is a global community of engineering leaders who come together to discuss all things leadership, teams, tools, and tech. Bookmarked is our monthly book club that takes place on the first Tuesday of every month. Our sessions cover an array of engineering and leadership books that our awesome Lead Dev audience can draw insights and practical experiences from. I'm Suzan Bond and I'm your moderator. I'm a former COO of a scaling startup and a leadership consultant. My specialty is tech leaders. You can find me on Twitter at Suzan Bond. Today we'll be talking about daring to be different. If you have questions for Raji Rajagopalan, so sorry, Raji, I try so hard with your name. Please pop them in the Q&A feature on Zoom. I'm also very terribly excited for our conversation, so I'm going to calm the inner Cocker Spaniel. I'm very excited to have Raji on today. So Raji is a partner engineering director in the Windows and Devices group at Microsoft. She believes cloud and data are two superpowers every company can use to digitally transform themselves. She currently runs a team of distributed developers, building an Azure service for remote intelligent testing called TestBase for Microsoft 365. When not building tech, she is speaking, writing, mentoring, or jogging. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Susan. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. And I know for the folks that are calling in from the US, happy Women's History Month as well. This is the start of the Women's History Month. And it's really a privilege for me to be part of this conversation, talking to this community on this beautiful day.
Oh, thank you. We're really excited to have you. So I want to start with just the background. Like, what made you write this book?
Yeah, so this question gets asked a lot. I have to say, writing has been in my life for a very, very long time. If you have read my book, you know that my father is a big role model, supporter, advocate. You know, he's always cheering me on. He's my very first cheerleader, to be honest. And I grew up watching him waking up at 4 a.m. every single day. He was a banker. He's retired now. He was a banker. And he was a single dad as well. So you can imagine he had a pretty busy life. So he had to wake up at 4 a.m. and every single day. And he wrote. He's a poet. He still publishes. He's like 75 years old, and he's still publishing a lot of books of poems that just impresses me. Amazing. But writing has been in my life for a very long time. I was inspired by him. But this particular book is an extension of my mentorship conversations that I have had with several people in the industry. As I was having these conversations, these are very rich conversations. I learned probably as much from the people that I mentor as I'm guessing they're learning from me. But these conversations, I started seeing similar topics. People were sort of, struggling with similar types of challenges, how to get recognized at work, how to speak up in meetings when you're, very different or when you're very junior, or whatever difficulty that you're struggling with, how to deal with difficult people, how to, give presentations. So it's common topics, common questions kept coming up. And when I was having these conversations, I decided I would start a blog and answer them, scale out my advice and reach more people that are probably also having similar questions in their minds as well. So I started my blog. I think it was 2015 when I started my blog, and I started getting quite a bit of readership, and people wrote to me very nice notes, and people wrote to me about how they were going into a meeting, a very important meeting in a new job and whatnot. And they chanced upon my blog, and they found what I wrote to be quite valuable and useful, and not just the fact that it inspired them to go out there and try something that they were afraid of doing, but also to have some specific tips that they could use to overcome some of their fears and so on. So, and then as I was building that platform and getting that feedback and iterating on my writing, how I can make it better, how I can make it stick more, some people actually came to me and said, why don't you write a book? Why don't you expand on these insights and write a book? And that's kind of how I conceptualized the book. I'm hearing quite a bit from a lot of the people still who are reading my book that's been quite valuable.
And so how did you approach writing the book? How did you think about that? You had all these blog posts, what was that process like?
I actually started collecting material since that time, right? Like when I decided that, well, I'm going to start writing my advice in my blog, I started collecting material. So my manuscript the material has been getting collected for a number of years. But it was never like, I did not sit back in 2015 thinking that at some point I'm going to write a book. Like I said, it's a process of experimentation and evolution. And I mean, that's been the red thread in my professional journey as well. I talk about this in the book too, that a lot of things have come to me as, as I've tried to answer what the world, the universe is asking me to do, what is the need of the day. And so this was not a very planful process. I've been collecting the material, but then as I decided last year that this is the time when I was going to publish the book, I went and did a lot of tinkering, researching, figuring out, is this something that I want to go through the traditional publishing route? Is it something I want to do, self-publishing? What does self-publishing mean? What are different applications I could use? I'm not an artist. How do I do cover design? How do I get to market? All of that sort of, interesting things. Publishing industry is a completely different beast than, as I'm sure you said, you're from New York, is a completely different beast than technology industry too. And just like when you're getting into technology industry, you have to figure out a lot of things and you have to learn from various sources. I had to do the same with book writing too, which was, I really, really love learning new things and doing new things. And this was a fantastic process for me to apply myself to.
I bet. Well, one more quick question about the background before we get into the, more meat of things. What I love about your book is it really interesting. It is like part memoir, but also part practical advice, and which I really love the choice you made with that. And I'm just wondering what made you make that choice to have that kind of blend, which we don't see as often in business books.
Yeah, the great question, Susan. My goal with this book is to help people, right? Is to sort of, that's been sort of a driving factor in my professional journey, is to make a difference in the world. And my goal with this book is that, I want to help people that are having challenges, either entering a tech career or, advancing once you're in the tech career, advancing to more senior levels. So I really want the book to be useful and valuable to people, right? So that's the part where it's more, how do I convey practical advice that people can take away and apply in their own lives to, do bigger things, dream big, and, achieve more success with your own careers. But a lot of times I myself as a reader, I'm first a reader, then a writer. So I read a lot of books, and I myself find it valuable to really relate to the author and have stories. I do strongly believe that human stories make anything, ideas, advice, anything really stick in your mind and for you to remember, right? So that is why I decided that I would share some stories. And some of these stories I'm sharing are, I had to be okay with being vulnerable, because I'm not retired. I'm still, in the process of, having my own professional journey as well, right? So I have to kind of be okay with sharing some of the more vulnerable pieces of my story, like, how do I deal with anxiety in front of very senior people? So a lot of that, I had to deal with that. The publishing industry also, even with the mixing of memoirs and the and advice, publishing industry tries to stick to one lane. They actually advise you not to do that, because they don't know what to categorize your book into. I mean, this is something that we all sort of fall into even in our professional lives. Like, I don't know what to categorize you as. Are you an Asian woman? Are you an Asian person? Are you a woman? Are you a woman of color? People like to sort of put you in little, categories. And I feel like, even with the book that I published, it's the same thing. There was a need for publishers to kind of put my book into a specific genre, specific category. And that's why one of the reasons why I decided to go with self-publishing, because I wanted this to be something that is really going to be valuable for my readers. But at the same time, I also want to share my stories, because I strongly believe that is going to help the readers remember the advice a lot more. And also to sort of see that successful people, quote unquote, people that are successful in the industry they have challenges too, and they have always had challenges, and they continue to have challenges, and it's okay for you to have challenges, and you will, with the right tools and the right principles, you will be able to overcome them.
Yeah, I mean, you're just human. Everybody's human, right? Nobody gets through life without problems or challenges. That's such a great message. Okay, one more question before we get into the meat of it. Just because I think it's really interesting how you got into technology. That might be really good for people to sort of hear.
I talk about this, I think this is almost the first or the second chapter of the book, is my early story, how I got into technology. I actually did not, when I was a little girl growing up, I did not dream of being a technology professional at all. I was not into computer science. I was not passionate about tech. I hear a lot of my colleagues say that they have been passionate about tech from age 12 and whatnot. I got into technology, I sometimes say, almost by accident, right? And I was a little girl. I lost my mother when I was 5 years old. She was 32, and it was a pretty unexpected but pivotal moment in my life. It shaped quite a bit of my personal life, my personality, as well as my professional life as well, right? So, after that, I wanted to be a doctor because, I really wanted to help people like my mother, right? I wanted to cure diseases. I wanted to, solve problems in people's lives and really make a difference with my work. And unfortunately, that was one of the very early failures in my life. I've had a lot of other failures in my professional journey, but that was the very first, one of the very early failures in my life was being not able to get into medicine. It was a very competitive field, still a competitive field, but I just didn't have the right kind of grades to get into medicine. So I cast about trying to see what I can do next. And, a lot of at that time it was the 90s, and the technology field was just getting started. The internet was getting built, and, applications were becoming a thing. And people were starting to rely more and more on technology for connection, for entertainment, for communication, whatnot. And a lot of my advisors and family members kind of pointed me in the direction of computer science. They said, well, you like solving problems, you're good at it, you want to help people. This seems like something that you might want to check out. So I became curious. I decided to become a programmer. And since then, it's been a wonderful sort of journey of learning and journey of really having meaning in my life. And technology has brought a lot of meaning in my life.
Yeah, I love that story. I mean, really read the book. The stories are really great. They're really fantastic. All right. So in the book, you talk about 7 skills that you consider to be important for your career. I wondered if you could sort of describe those, briefly for folks, what you think they are, those 7 ones.
Yeah, I wouldn't probably get into every single one of those 7 skills. I think, I'll touch upon a few things, especially as we are going through a massive sea change in the world right now with everything, uncertain times coupled with new technological innovations, AI and everything coming about, right? I think it's super, super important to embrace the unknown. I talk about courage as one of the very first skills that's one of the biggest superpowers that I've had in my career as well, is really drumming up the courage to do big things and raising my hand, even if it feels like this is not something that I've ever done. This is something that I feel like I don't have all the skills, all the qualifications to do. I have always been able to drum up the courage, and courage is an important skill for you. And like I said, I talk about these as skills and not as traits, even though you can think of them as traits as well, right? Because I do believe in growth mindset. I think it is, when you say it's a skill, you can apply yourself to getting better at it, to improving that skill, to getting that skill, to mastering that skill, right? So I think that courage is a skill, is a muscle that you can get stronger and stronger. So courage is number 1. Agility is the number 2. And that is especially true now. I have done this quite a bit. When I started in my career, I was a C++ developer, and then Java and C# came on board, and I became a C# developer. And then big data, data came on board. Like I started doing a lot of SQL and, database programming. And then I went into big data when big data revolution happened. How do you do MapReduce? How do you do Hadoop? And all of that big data, wonderful stuff. I had to learn all of that. So I had been sort of reinventing myself throughout my career journey. And I think that is super important to do as well, not to be super fixed in your identity, but to see how you can, constantly learn, constantly change. Now AI is coming on board, and how do you now pick up these new skills that will make you successful in the world of tomorrow? I think that's always the mindset that you should have. Agility is another one. Resilience is another skill that I talk about. I have this habit, I call out the 9 thinking traps, and I fall into a number of those thinking traps often, and I have to work on myself to get out of those traps. But, a lot of times I end up dwelling a lot on my failures, even though the failures might not be something that other people notice. I'm super, super self-critical, right? So I end up looking, oh my God, I didn't say this word quite right when I was talking to Susan. And, I'm like, I fail. So I think it's important to not dwell on your failures, mainly because failures are great teaching moments. You learn a lot more from failures than you do from success. But also because what you think of as failure is actually much more magnified in your own head than it is in other people's heads, right? So I think you have to you have to be resilient. You have to get up when you fall down, brush off anything that's stuck to you and keep going. Experimentation, I believe in it, little baby steps. If you're trying to do really big things, I think it's important to take baby steps and sort of, dip your toes and find out, like I said, with the process of writing, I did not write my book immediately. I was in the process of figuring out, is my writing resonating? What kind of material resonated? What is the user, what is my reader feedback? And so it's very much like how I build products as well at Microsoft. I'm sure the listeners, the people in this call are, building products. You're always experimenting. You're always looking at data, trying to see how do you need to pivot? Do you need to change something? What is the data telling you, right? So experimentation is another skill that you need to have. Learning, growth mindset, constantly learning. We talked about books. I'm first a reader. I read a lot of books. If you have a 30-minute conversations with you, I'll give you 2 book recommendations at least, right? So it's sort of like something that I really, really enjoy doing, but also something that has really helped me in my career. So I talk about 7 skills. I don't want to drain through all of them, but this is sort of like a sneak peek.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I think they're really useful. It's so interesting. In the book, you describe a time when you were too shy, scared to pick up the phone when it rang. And which I find is so interesting. I'm like, wow, I don't see Raji that way now, right? So how did you get from our interactions? Like, how did you get from there to now being able to keynote at big conferences?
It was definitely a journey. And even today, I am very much an introverted leader, right? Like, I think, a lot of the folks and my colleagues describe me as such, as much as, I have become a lot less shy than in the past in speaking up. And those are all things that I talk about in the book as well. What are some of the mantras I've developed, and what are some of the tricks up my sleeve that I use to overcome that? But I am still on any given day, I would rather be sitting by my fireplace reading a book than going out and partying. So I'm very much, I derive a lot of energy just, being alone. But I think the shyness bit of it, I'll tell you that story I describe in the book as well. I was very new in this country. I immigrated to the US and then moved to Canada. But I was here, immigrated in 1998. And at that time, I had learned how to read and write English growing up in India. I studied in a number of small towns in India, but I never actually spoke English. So my fluency, first of all, I was not confident in my own fluency, and probably I was not as fluent as definitely I am today, right? My fluency has improved over time. But I was super, super shy, because I thought that when the phone rang and I picked up and I had a conversation, first of all, I would not be able to understand what the other person was saying, because they were, I thought that, well, the accent is very different. Everything is super new here, and I'm a stranger in this strange place, and I would not be able to, understand what they're saying. But on the other side, I would not be able to have a conversation. I would not be able to string a sentence together in English, right? So I think that was a lot of these stories going on in my head, partially true, but partially made up as well. But I decided that, like I said, growing up too, I really wanted to make a difference in the world. I wanted to do something with my life, right? So I had that hunger, that fire in me always. And so I realized that, well, if I did not even pick up the phone and the phone rang, I'm not going to be able to do anything with my life. I have to overcome this. And I decided, well, I'll just throw myself in the deep end. I'll go and I'll do a master's in, sign up in a college. I'll do a master's, and I have to at that point speak in English with all my colleagues and my professors and whatnot. So I'll immerse myself in a place where I have to speak English all the time. And that's number one, is just being okay with being uncomfortable in the first place. And then I also did a bunch of things, like I signed up for Toastmasters. I don't know if you've heard about Toastmasters. It's a great organization. I'm not a spokesperson for Toastmasters or anything, but it really did help me be able to stand up in front of a group of people and tell a story. And, it's little things like this. I went to the library often. I brought a bunch of books and I read a lot of books. So it's a combination of really forcing myself to do the thing that I was afraid of doing, and taking very concrete steps like Toastmasters, which could help me improve and get better at what I was not very good at the time, and reading and improving myself constantly. And again, I also talk about this. I think having that courage when the opportunity came up to speak in front of 10,000 people at a keynote at Microsoft, I did not know if I was capable of doing that. I had never spoken in front of more than, at that time, 300 people. Even the 300 people was just my organization, right? So I did not know if I had it in me to speak to this audience of 10,000 people plus. And but then I raised my hand. I was like, okay, I'm going to figure it out. But by that point in my life, I sort of started getting that confidence that, well, I've done things where I was very, very afraid of doing something, and I was able to, figure it out. I was able to rehearse. I was able to ask for help, and I was able to figure it out. And so I will be able to do this as well. So that's how that happened.
That's so good. I mean, I want to talk on a slightly different topic, but I think kind of related, which is I think most of us has struggled with comparing ourselves to others. I mean, I know I have, right? Like they're here and I'm there. And, I mean, I've done that. I admit it. So how can folks, deal with envy and focus less on external validation? What tips might you have for us?
Couple of tips, actually, and one of them is an actual skill I talk about quite a bit in the book. It's mindfulness, but I'll start with the first one, which is I believe that you cannot be comparing apples to oranges. Like Suzan, you have had a very, very different life than I have had, right? And you have different accomplishments. I have different accomplishments, and you've made different sacrifices. I've made different sacrifices. So comparing my life to yours and saying, well, Suzan is this and I'm this, and why am I not Suzan, or why Suzan is not me? I think it doesn't make a lot of sense. And, it's the same way with your colleagues. Sometimes I get this question from the people that I mentor, that I started in this company or in this industry at exactly the same time as this other person. But this other person is already at a principal level or partner level or whatever is the hierarchy in your company. This person is at a higher level than me, even though we started at the exact same time in the industry. And so I feel bad. And that's exactly the advice I give the people that I talk to in my mentoring conversations is I think that this person has made other sacrifices in their lives. This person has not had these accomplishments that you have had. So I think, you first of all, it's important to not compare apples to oranges. Their life is very different. Your life is very different. So I think it's better for me, I feel like, to focus on what I can achieve with my life, what impact I can have, and how I can best use the talents that I have and the skills that I have picked up, how I can use those the best way possible, rather than comparing, to very different lives, right? So that's one thing. The other thing is I talk about mindfulness quite a bit in my book, and I meditate every single day. I wake up in the morning. That's almost the first thing I do. I meditated today before our call. It was just 15 minutes of meditation, not too long, right? It really helps me get centered and creates a sense of clarity in my head that really I'm able to take throughout the rest of my day as well. And that mindfulness is not just about meditation, right? It's about really paying attention to what you care about, where your attention is. I think really being mindful of that is important. And that includes, what are other people talking about me? Are they approving what I'm doing? How many likes do I have? How many retweets do I? All of these kinds of things, this is the external validation, the seeking of approval. The more mindful you are with either your meditation practice or even just paying attention to how, what thoughts are popping up in your head and how those thoughts are really impacting your emotions and the rest of your day. I think that is going to be super important. So I talk about mindfulness quite a bit in that sense as well.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. Well, and another topic, like I just want to kind of cover a smattering of things that I found were really interesting. I mean, you have a chapter on feeling at home when you're different from others. And I'd love to hear more about how you learned to do that.
Yeah, I think I talk about this, incident in my childhood. It starts from my very much from my childhood, and growing up, you know, there was a lot of colorism in my culture, right?
Mm.
Like I come from South India, and dark skin was not considered to be very beautiful. And I am very dark skinned, even compared to a lot of my cousins. I'm dark skinned in my, where I was growing up. And so when in my family, there was when my cousins and we used to get together, there often we'll all dress up, in the beautiful saris, colorful saris, and flowers in our hair and stuff like that, really prettying ourselves up because we are teenage girls at the time, right? And then, a lot of times the comments would be like, oh, this cousin who's fair skinned, so beautiful. This other cousin who's also fair skinned, so beautiful. Oh, Raji, you're great at math, and I'm like, okay. Well, at that time it was a little painful because that kind of gave me the sense that, well, I'm not quite as beautiful as my cousins, mainly because I didn't have the right skin color. But it actually, in hindsight, now that I'm able to connect the dots better with the advantage of hindsight, I know that actually gave me the confidence to actually be in the field of STEM, right? Like it gave me a lot of confidence to do math, to pursue a career in computer science. So I, in a way, I'm grateful for that, but I think it's a really bad thing, and I think that's people still deal with that. So I've always been sort of a misfit in my family where I was growing up, and I've always been, like I said, I grew up also in different relatives' houses, and so it's sort of like in every relative's house you have to learn new rules, and what is this new school, who are these new friends. So I've always been able to sort of deal with being a misfit, being not quite the person that is the same as every other person in the room. And now it's the same thing that I see in a lot of corporate rooms and meeting rooms, boardrooms, and so on as well. I think the way I have started dealing with that is by developing mantras that really work for me, right? I talk about this in relationship to imposter syndrome as well. For me, the mantras that work for me when I feel like, well, I'm the most junior person in this room, or I'm the only person of color in this room, or whatever, I tell myself that I belong at this table. I have earned the right to sit at this table. I've earned the right to share my perspectives. My perspectives are important to share, right? So I tell myself that. So it becomes a lot more intentional in that sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think that can be really useful and helpful for us to think about. You mentioned it earlier, and I want to go back to it. You mentioned these like 9 thinking traps, and I'm curious about one that you might pick out that's like common, or one that you've dealt with, and how do you sort of overcome it or work through that, thinking trap?
Yeah. I think a lot of times I fall prey to catastrophizing, right? Which is like something happened and I did not do something right, or someone else commented on something, and now it's sort of like I'm going to get fired. I'm going to lose all my friends and family. I'm going to live under my bridge. I don't know, Suzan, if this happens to you at all, but a lot of times that happens to me, where it's a very, very even in that a keynote I describe in my book, where I have just spoken in front of 10,000 people, and one of my demos didn't work. As often happens in demos, there was a problem with the deployment, and the UI that I had practiced on completely changed in my actual demo. So my script was now trash, and I actually could not use any of that. So I had to quickly wrap up, and I had to wing it, right? And I had to get off stage. So I felt like, oh my God, I just did a really, really bad job here. And I failed my demo team, I failed my entire team, and all of these stories going on in my head. And then after that, it's also now everybody, including the CEO of my company, everybody was watching this demo, and they probably saw what a really bad job I did with this demo, and I'm going to get fired, I'm going to lose my job, I'm going to lose my family. So all of that string of negative things I started having in my head. And so it's important to kind of stop yourself, again, using mindfulness. I have used this thing called worry map. It's a tool where you can actually draw the map of worry that you have in your head. At that time, I did not sit down and do it on a piece of paper, but you can do it, which is you kind of walk through and reason through for every single worry you have that you're catastrophizing about. Is there any data that tells you that this worry is going to come true? And if it does indeed come true, how are you going to be able to handle that? Will you be able to handle that? What is the next immediate step you need to take in order to handle that, right? So really shifting from the emotional realm of your brain to the logical realm of your brain, I think that really helps.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've all catastrophized. I know in my 20s, I did that. I was sending in a box and with a cat on a river, and I had nothing and I had no friends. And I think that your tips are really good. We have to try to pull ourselves away from all those heavy emotions and get ourselves back to a more rational state of mind where we can reason about what happened and what we might need to do next, if anything.
That's right.
Right. Yeah, it's really good advice. So you had this powerful experience with your first manager at Microsoft who taught you that to be really successful, you should find opportunities rather than waiting for them to be given to you. And I'm surmising that from what you said in the book. I'm sure other people would love to know, like, what are some ways that we can identify those opportunities?
Yeah, I'll tell you the story first. I think this was the very first one-on-one that I had with my first manager at Microsoft. I'm brand new in the company. This was in 2005. I walk into his office and I'm like, hey, good to meet you, blah, blah, blah. Tell me, how can I be successful in this company, right? And he gave me this advice that I really, really cherish to this day. And that was that, look, Raji, and he kind of mimed, lifting a bucket. And this is a bucket where, think of this as a bucket full of opportunities. And every time you come into my office, I can pick up an opportunity from this bucket and I'll give it to you. And if you can, deliver on that opportunity reliably with quality and, as expected, blah, 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 then you'll do fine in this company. But really, in order to knock it out of the park, in order to excel and shine in Microsoft, you have to bring your own opportunity rather than take one from my bucket, right? So I think what he was trying to say was that you have to constantly be innovating. You have to look at the future. You have to see where I think the great one, Wayne Gretzky, a Canadian hockey player, said this, you have to skate to where the puck is going and not where the puck is today, right? So you have to look at where the industry is going, what your company needs what your team needs in the future, rather than, where you are currently. So constantly be scanning the horizon for these opportunities, constantly be looking at what's happening. And we talked about social media quite a bit. And in addition to cat videos and dog videos and YouTube cooking shows, that's one of the ways in which I really use the internet, is to kind of get a pulse for where the industry is going. What's everybody talking about these days? I think back when I was starting in this industry, it was all about test-driven development and extreme programming and agile programming and Scrum and Sprint, and all of that was just getting invented. And one of the things that actually helped me in my career was to bring all of that goodness into my team, into Microsoft, right? So that really helped because they knew that I'm actually a leader rather than I'm just executing on the tasks that are in front of me. Likewise, I think today there's more, different kinds of opportunities that are showing up in the horizon. So how do you go and how are you constantly paying attention to it? Read books, when you're online, not just doom scroll and look at cat videos and dog videos, as much as they're cute. And, I'm not discouraging you from doing that. I think it's super helpful to constantly be paying attention to what's happening in the industry and what you can learn from and improve yourself as well. And learn from your colleagues. I have the privilege of working with some amazing people that I learn from every single day, right? So what are your colleagues doing? And all these one-on-one conversations I have, I'm always picking up something that I can use in the future. Even when I'm reading books about something unrelated to leadership, business, technology, even when I'm reading something completely like in a fiction book, I'm always thinking about, is there something in there that I can apply to my team, that I can apply to what I'm doing with my product, right? So it's about learning about humans. It's about learning to do analogical thinking. How can you take something from a different domain, apply it to a problem that you're having in your current domain? So all of that really can help.
Yeah, that's really great. And I do think as we get further in our careers, being able to identify those opportunities, whether we go that IC track or we go a manager track, can really distinguish us and we can give more value to the team, which ends up distinguishing us. People notice and pay attention when someone isn't just like, here, let me take this thing, but hey, did you think about this? Here's this new potential opportunity. That can really be a career accelerant.
Absolutely.
Yeah, really great. All right, one last question. Near the end of the book, you list some rules you follow. And I was curious about, they're really great rules. What's maybe one that had a big impact on you in your career?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this a little bit. I wouldn't call them rules. I don't know if I have
Mm,
described them as rules. It's more like
mm,
reminders for myself, right? Like I
mm,
think
mm,
it's sort of one of those things where I honestly feel like we tend to in this industry, we tend to kind of look at our success in a very unidimensional way, like getting from one level to another level to another level to this very
mm,
big title, and that kind of is what often we remind ourselves as success, right? But for me, success is really having a lot of different experiences in life, right? Like being able to have very rich experiences and learn about new cultures, learn about new people. It's being able to give back to the community, being able to lift up others that are behind me, being able to make a difference. Like I said, that's been sort of a red thread in my life, being able to make a difference with the work I do
mm,
with my life, right? Those are also my success is sort of not just the unidimensional, how I have progressed in the industry or in my company, but it's about how all of these things that I really want to achieve in my life, how am I doing with all of those dimensions of my life? And for that, I always remind myself that it's important to not dwell on my failures. So we talked about it quite a bit. When you're trying to do all these things, and when we're trying to have a very rich set of experiences in your life, you're often outside your comfort zone. And when you're outside your comfort zone, you might end up failing. And it's okay to fail. It's okay to still not try to play too safe. And this is another piece of advice that I got from one of my managers and mentors
mm,
at Microsoft is, it's as I was progressing up the career ladder, at some point he told me that I'm going to get limited if I'm playing it too safe, if I'm not taking
mm,
risks with what I'm doing, if I'm not signing up to do big things in the company, projects that are interesting, but appear out of my reach, or even slightly, or even really out of my reach. I think if I'm not signing up to do those things, it would come to limit me in the future. And so it's important to have a bit of an appetite for risk taking in order to have that step change in your career, right? So I do think that when you take those risks, there is a chance that you're going to fail, and it's okay to fail because you will learn and you will improve yourself, and that actually will give you rich experiences that you will cherish in the future. So that is one of the most important reminders that I give myself every day, is that no matter what I'm going to do today, it's okay if I fail because I'm going to learn a lot from that failure.
That's such great advice to end on. Thank you so much for joining us during this session. Raji will be joining us over on the Lead Dev Slack, where she will be taking some questions. Head over to the Bookmarked channel where that'll be taking place. Thanks again.
Thank you, Susan. This was lovely.